So we're in chapter 9, okay, of Genesis, and we're at the beginning of the chapter. We finished chapter 8. Remember, chapter 7 was the beginning of the flood, and Noah and his family were told to get on the ark. And then they sat for the 7 days before the rain started. And when the rain started, God closed up the ark. And then in chapter 8, the waters started to recede. And when the waters receded, Noah and his family were told to get off the ark, get all the animals off the ark. Noah built an altar, and gave praise and worship to God, and then God made some covenants, with Noah. So as we go into chapter 9, I don't think we did any of this last week. I don't think we did. Anyway, I've got there as the title part. God's covenant with Noah and all of creation, what the world will be like in a post-flood environment. You got to remember, God's judgment of the flood wasn't just on man, it was on the whole earth. Okay, so now so if we ever think we're special, so God made a covenant with us, God's making this covenant with all of creation. So he's making promises to restore. The covenant with Jesus, the promises of Jesus when he returns, is also to make all things new, to make all things, that it says that in 2 Corinthians 5, around verse 21, it says that God has reconciled all things through Jesus Christ. Okay? And all things means all things. So whatever has been cursed, the earth has been cursed, animals have been cursed. We're going to see today where, animals are going to fear man and they're going to be eaten. That's not good, so. Okay, so I've got in verses 1 through 17, I've got new rules for a new universe. So somebody want to read 1 through 4, verses 1 through 4 in chapter 9, nice and loud into the microphones? Okay.
God's covenant with Noah. Then God blessed Noah and his sons, saying to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you will fall upon all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds of the air, upon every creature that moves along the ground, and upon all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hand. Everything that lives and moves will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. But you must not eat meat that has lifeblood still in it."
Yeah. So it's saying is, Noah, built the altar, made the sacrifice, honored God. God makes covenant, and now he speaks to. So God blesses Noah and his sons, says to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth." Earth's pretty empty at that point. This is just like the Garden of Eden type thing. With Adam and Eve. To be fruitful and to multiply. So they have to start all over again. Now, these next verses are really kind of, I don't know, to me, they're kind of confusing. The way that they just it just kind of gets dropped in there. "And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the earth, on every bird in the air, and on all that move on the earth, and all the fish of the sea, they are given into your hand." So Noah walks out of his tent. I guess he had a tent, probably didn't have a condo, so he probably had a tent. Walks out of his tent. There's some animals there grazing. They're going to see Noah, and they're going to run. Doesn't it seem strange? I mean, that it's just kind of plopped in there that way. I walked out on my porch, my front porch the other day, maybe a week ago. And I'm just, I go out in the morning, I greet the day every morning, hello day. And I look down and right about there's a bunny. Now he obviously didn't see me coming, so we're standing there and we're staring at it. Well, he's out the corner of his eye, he's got that mouth going and the nose twitching. And he's kind of looking at me out the corner of his eye. And he's probably saying, holy smokes, I missed that one coming. So I tried to talk to him. And you don't go anywhere like that. And then when he thought that he had all of his adrenaline pumping, he took off. I wasn't there to hurt him. What is it that made him afraid of me? Yeah, see, Dennis knows the answer. He points to the Bible. Pardon? Yeah. You got Noah's message. No, so, so like I say, this seems kind of strange in here, but we look at it and we do see that, hey, go try to catch a fish if they don't run from you. Dennis, make sure your microphones are on, turned on, blue lights.
When God said they could be eaten and you could now eat meat, it changed everything.
Yeah.
That was, all the relationship with all the animals, including the fish, which I found rather interesting.
Yeah. No. So we've got this part. So we know the be fruitful and multiply. I mean, there's just nobody there. So he's telling them, giving them the command. And he's giving the command to not just Noah, but to all the animals. And, he goes, remember, you guys were brought 2 by 2 onto the ark for this very day. Get busy. So, but then, God decreed that humanity could be permitted to eat the flesh of animals. He said in verse 3, I have given you all things, even as the green herbs. This suggests that it probably wasn't that way before the flood. Before the flood, you had so what do you think? And I think I asked this last week. I said, hey, be prepared for this. What do you think's going on there? Why do you think God all of a sudden is giving permission to eat meat?
There wasn't enough vegetation to keep them alive.
Well, that may be too. I mean, it probably was. But even at that time, which animals you're going to eat? You're going to eat the ones that you just brought along, but they're supposed to populate, also. I just find it strange. I don't doubt it. I don't doubt that it was said, and I don't doubt that it was meant, but it just seems like, and what does it say? God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply. No problem there. But then right after that, you got this thing about, the animals. The animals are going to be afraid of you because you're going to eat them. And I would imagine that meant that the animals are going to eat each other also, right?
I noticed, is there a change in the sacrificial system? Because when Cain and Abel gave their offerings, it doesn't mention anything about burning the flesh, but in Noah's sacrifice, he burns the flesh of the animal.
Yeah. Well, it's like everything else we talk about. If it's not talking about it and they're doing it, chances are it was talked about, but we don't have it in the record. I mean, that's all that you can say. It goes back to the one with Abel. How did Abel know to make a sacrifice? And how did they know which one was a proper sacrifice and which was a one, that was going to upset God?
Which brings up another question about the fatted portion. Fatted portion could mean that he killed the lamb and bought the good meat off that lamb, or it could mean that fat portion means generosity.
Don't know. I mean, so that's the thing. You see, we don't know. We don't know. And then, so what you have to do, and this is why the Jews have, like the Talmud and the Mishnah, and it's not the Gomorrah, that was that city, but it's something like, it starts with a G, I forget what it is. But they have all these writings because the rabbis tried to figure out, what all these things meant. Okay. And you got to remember that coming down through time, there's stories, oral stories that are passed along. Well, all of this was oral stories. Yeah. But oral stories that are passed along and then they dive into them. We do this all the time. Pick up a commentary on a biblical book. I mean, what you basically have with a commentary. Now you'd have to go back maybe to the first commentary, because the guy who's going to write a commentary today, he's going to grab a bunch of other commentaries and plagiarize most of their stuff. I mean, but you're going to study. You're going to read 20 commentaries, boil it down yourself to what you think, you can teach to your, to your students like that. But that's all a commentary is just kind of talking through a situation. Now, here's the thing. So I look, I looked in a bunch of Jewish sources to find out what they said about eating animals. And they're all over the ballpark, as far as what, some say, well, because man wanted to eat animals, but he wasn't allowed to eat animals. So now God's saying, okay, I'm going to let you eat animals. Sometimes, God lets us do things that are sinful, let's say divorce. This isn't against anybody here who's divorced. Divorce. Is divorce sinful?
No.
Okay, raise wrong. Is divorce sinful? Huh? All divorce is sinful. But it says, but Moses allowed you to give a decree of divorce because, no, because of sin in your lives. Because Moses knows that if I can't divorce my wife, when we're crossing the wilderness, I'm going to kill her and bury her in the desert. Well, no, that's the thing. No, but you read it. Jesus speaking, he says that the reason that Moses gave a decree to divorce was because of sin. So that makes divorce sin. Okay, but because I know you're sinful and I know you need a way out, okay, for this condition, like adultery. Okay, so I'm sorry? There you go. Well, no, but they used to say that with the Jews, that a Jewish man could divorce his wife if she burned his toes, like that. So, but anyway, so the thing is that God may have allowed the eating of the meat because he knew man was sinful, had murder in his heart, and all of that stuff. We don't know because it doesn't say. But anyway, so except I'm reading all these Jewish commentaries or these papers, on the Jewish sites, and they've got some that say, well, we don't know that eating meat before the flood wasn't allowed because it really doesn't say. It just talks about eating the vegetation, but it doesn't say that they weren't, eating the meat.
But it does say they were very sinful. That's why God destroyed them.
Well, yeah.
So consequently, if they were very sinful, then eating meat was sinful. They went ahead and did it.
Right.
You don't know.
Yeah. No, and like I think I said this last week, is that we've got no indication that God said that Noah and his family were sinless and they just weren't as rotten to the core as the other people that he ended up by destroying. In fact, he never said anything about the family. He just said that Noah was righteous in his generation. And we talked about that a little bit, about he wasn't as bad as the way the other people in the generation were, to do that. So, Pastor.
So we heard that the aroma when they got off the ark was pleasing to the Lord, probably pleasing to man. It smells good for some reason, right? If you never, cooked a steak before or something. But then they had the 7 pairs of the clean animals, so they wouldn't take a lot of animals to feed this small group of people either. So they took the clean sacrificial purposes too, but some for eating too, I guess. Just
like I said, my only point is it doesn't say, so we don't want to go too far with what we say. And like I say, when you read, the commentaries, or you read what it says, like I say, I like to go back to the Jewish writings, because a lot of times what you do is you get into a Christian writing, and all of a sudden the killing of the animals and the eating of the animals leads back to Jesus, which it probably does, but that doesn't help us figure out the why part. It helps us figure out the purpose part, but not why'd this get changed and all that. So, and so in verse 4, all of a sudden he gives restrictions. He says that in 3, he says, every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I have given you all things, even as the green herbs, but you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is its blood. So you're not allowed to eat, consume animals' blood, because that's the source of life. In the Garden of Eden, can't remember who said, in the Garden of Eden, God gave man everything to eat in the garden, but he held back for himself the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He held back for himself something that was meaningful to God. Okay, how are we going to define it? And here you've got kind of the same thing. Okay, you can eat all of the animals, but you can't eat them with their blood in them, because blood is the source of life. And he holds that back for himself. Again, he's got, I'm keeping this one. I'm keeping this blood as sacred. You can't eat it that way. Then when you get later on into the dietary laws, he's got more things you can't do to animals. A long time ago, I did a part on kosher, what constituted kosher and all. But basically, the things that make things kosher, if it's an animal, is that it was killed respectfully. That it was killed in a way that offered the least amount of pain. Things that, it's kind of like ethical eating, like that. You won't, what is it? You won't boil a calf in its mother's milk, and, because you got that, offspring parent, relationship. So you got those kinds of things. Wife can eat kosher, you can't have a cheeseburger. So that's the way that they've interpreted it today, because you can't mix the dairy and the meat. That's why they keep separate dishes. You can't mix the dairy and the meat. So God's concerned with his creation. Okay, you can eat them, but you have to do it a certain way. So let's see. So in verse 5 through 7, he says, surely for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning. From the hand of every beast I will require it, and from the hand of man. From the hand of every man's brother I will require the life of man. Whosoever shed, and I think everybody's familiar with this verse, in verse 6, whosoever sheds a man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. And as for you, be fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply it. Now, see, it's important here. He says, surely for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning, and from the hand of every beast. The animals are under the same judgment we are. Under the same rules we are. That somehow, and again, it's not explained here, but somehow the animals are judged by how they treat other animals. But the animals are smart enough. They just eat for their food. They don't go out on a Saturday night and, a bunch of cows load up on a car and go out and have a drive-by shooting against the deer or something. Not like we do. So, they do it the right way. So there probably won't be too much judgment like that on the animals. But what's talked about here is that if they're doing it wrong, God will require, about their lifeblood for them. So
On that one, Gene,
I'm sorry.
on that one, on verse 6,
Uh-huh.
does that mean that the Bible is pro capital punishment?
Sounds like it. Sounds like it.
But we don't, then man has instituted laws to govern man that says that in some instances, killing is allowed, and justifiable homicide and so on and so forth.
Well, right. Well, you got to remember that it said it there, justifiable homicide. Killing isn't wrong. That's where the King James Bible is incorrect, where it says, thou shalt not kill. The Hebrew word there is for the word murder. They have two words just like we do, kill and murder. And so, but here's the thing with the King James is that the King James, the Old English uses two words. When you did justifiable killing, in King James language, what's it called? Okay. What did David do? How many people did David do what to? Slay. He slew them. He slay them. In King James English, that's the word for kill. Like killing, just general killing. The word for murder for the King James was kill. So killing was unjustifiable. Slaying or to slew someone is justifiable killing. So the King James is wrong to our mode of English, but it was right for their day. So King David slew 1,000 men, and it was God. I mean, pardon? Right. Yeah. So what were you going to say, Andy? Use a microphone. Do you have a microphone? Murder is the taking of an innocent life. It's the unjustifiable killing. But in battle, we do have certain rules of war where people do murder while they are at. We saw that in Vietnam with the My Lai massacre. We've had people in the Iraqi wars and that who have been charged with murders for the unjustifiable killing of civilians in cities and stuff like that. So the main thing is that whatever God considers an unjustifiable killing, he's just saying, I will require your blood of you. So now back to what Ray said in the very beginning, though, is so how, kind of like, so how does society make laws where we don't kill the people who, we don't execute, you want to be precise with my words, where we don't execute people who murder other people. We're not a theocracy, even in America, which nobody would mistake us for. But we don't live under God's law. We live under our Constitution, and and we're glad that we do. Because what's that? Well, but that was written by man, and that was added to the thing in what, 1950s. But we should be glad. I know this is going to sound strange, but we should be glad that we don't live under God's law like that. Because what are you going to do when the Muslims outpopulate us and we're living under Sharia law? And they say we're just enforcing God's law. See, we don't. Pardon? I can't hear.
Better
Oh, get better guns. No, I'm just saying. So we we if anything, God hold us at least to be consistent to the laws that we make. You know, yeah, but yeah, it'd get awfully hard to. Yeah. Now, if you want to legislate that way, you know, if somebody were to bring to Congress and say, you know, I have this idea. I think that we ought to just have executions for anybody who murders, and we'll define what murder is, you know, because there's different levels of homicide. But we'll pick the ones, the 2 or 3 say, that we say are bad enough for execution. Now the law becomes, now you'd be breaking the law of the land if you weren't executing the people for the things that they were executed for. But that's still legislation. That's not, you know, I don't think a lawyer can pull out the Bible and say, you know, during a sentencing trial for someone and say to the jury, here, read Genesis 9:6 out loud here for me while you're considering your, you know, your sentences. So yeah, I know. Yeah. So like I say, I mean, I don't want to say the Bible's not important, but the Bible should be important to us as Christians, and society does what it, you know, because I don't think we ever really saw, I'd have something, but I don't think that we really ever saw Jesus quoting the Bible to get himself out of trouble with Rome. You know, it's like, no, I'm under Roman law and do what you will. You know, Paul was that way. You know, the only time that Paul appealed to Roman law, he did it as a citizen, not as a Christian. He said, wait a minute, I'm Roman born. I have Roman citizenship, so I get to be treated a certain way. You know, like that. But he didn't say, well, the Bible says that you have to do this, or he didn't, because they'd go, huh? You go, what you talking about, Paul? So let's see. Anyway, so again, so we got all of this, you know, stuff with blood. I've got in your notes the thing, you know, just a quick lesson on the blood. Yeah, because the blood's really important. Look, we've seen the blood here, you know, a couple of times. You can't eat the animal with its blood. I'm going to require blood of all the creation. I'm going to require the blood of anybody that takes the life of it. And there's going to be a whole bunch more to come, you know, in the scripture. So I've got the importance of the idea of blood in the Bible is shown by how often the word is used. It's used 424 times in 357 separate verses in the New King James Version. That's a lot. It makes for a bloody mess, you know. But again, it shows that it's important. See, a lot of times you'll see something that people really want to hang on to, and it's only mentioned once in the Bible. You know, and then they say, well, if it's mentioned once, that's important enough for me, which it probably is. But here you got something that's mentioned 424, you know, times. The respect for blood isn't based on mysticism or superstition, but simply because blood represents the life of the being, whether animal or human. When blood is poured out, life is poured out. Blood was the sign of mercy for Israel at the first Passover. Who remembers the story of the blood at the first Passover? Huh? Yeah. Kill the goat, the sheep, and put the blood on the, you know, on the door post there, and the angel of death will fly over, you know. Now think how powerful this is, though, is that there's life. That's what he's saying there. There's life in that blood. Death can't enter. But you know, if some Egyptians put the blood on their posts, their firstborn wouldn't have been killed. If a Jew said, that's a bunch of hooey, you know? And he says, I don't have to. My father is Abraham. Yeah, because that's what the Jews said to Jesus in John chapter 8. Our father is Abraham. So if they said, I don't believe this blood stuff, I don't know what Moses is talking about. I'm a child of Abraham. I don't have to do it. Their firstborn, toast. You know, so I mean that's pretty powerful. In the way that works. That goes the same for, we have people that are raised in the church and they go through all of this stuff. We talk about, they go through catechism, go through confirmation. Maybe they just sit in church. They still come to church just because the air conditioning is good on a hot Sunday morning in Lake Havasu. No, but I mean, that's their comfort level. They got friends and this and that, but they've never really had that, that born again Holy Spirit enlightenment in them. And they just go on, is that they may not have any of the benefits that Jesus promises there. But then you have other people who don't know Jesus, who are inquiring about Jesus. Maybe they come to faith and they do have the benefits, of it. So, we just don't use blood a lot anymore. I mean, I do it. I send the steak back if it's too rare, like that. But we just don't know what blood is. I mean, can you imagine? We've talked about it before when we were in Hebrews, how bloody that Holy of Holies was, because the sacrifices were done in there, and it was sprinkled on the Ark of the Covenant, and just on all the tent walls, when they had the tabernacle, and on all the stucco walls or whatever they used for the the real temple. And so how bloody things were and what they had to go through. And maybe we all need to go spend a day in a butcher shop, just to kind of get that feel. But the blood of Christ was shed once and for all, so we don't need to have to go back through that. So anyway, so the mercy for Israel at the first Passover, blood sealed God's covenant with Israel. I've got all these verses here, and you can look them up. I mean, it makes for a good, good study, in there. Hang on, let me see something here. Wrong thing. I grabbed the wrong thing. That doesn't matter. Okay. So it says blood sacrificed on the altar. And we've seen examples, of that. Blood set aside for the priests. Blood made atonement for God's people. And that was back in Exodus and in the Gospels. That blood was used. Blood sealed the new covenant. We did that today at the communion rail. This is the blood of the new covenant. It said his blood initiated, inaugurated, whatever the word is, the new covenant. Yeah. Blood justifies us. Blood brings redemption to us. Blood brings peace with God. Blood cleanses us. It's a Hebrews passage. Hebrews talks a lot about that. Blood gives entrance to God's holy place. Blood sanctifies us. Like I say, you can read those passages in Hebrews. Blood enables us to overcome Satan. So the thing is that we go through, study the verses and see what they have to say in there. Like I say, you get a good handle on that, and you'll see. So when so that when God's talking through Moses in Genesis and he's talking about the blood, it has more meaning than just we just read over it. And like I say, that we don't have much of a concept, for that. So, and then he said in verse 7, he says, "Be fruitful and multiply." This point's repeated because it needed emphasis. The earth badly needed repopulation. Noah and the family could have just been happy. It's not so crowded here. When we go to the movies, I'm not sitting shoulder to shoulder with people, like that. It's like they could have done that. They could have just had their grandkids. We want to have 3 and stuff like that. But they were commanded to do that, to be fruitful and to and to multiply. So then God spoke to Moses and to his sons with him, saying, "As for me, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, every beast of the earth with you, all that go out of the ark, every beast of the earth. Thus I establish my covenant with you. Never again shall all the flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. Never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth." I want to get one of your handouts. I think I got some words in here that I don't have in my notes. Anyway, so the thing is that is that he's making this covenant, and he says, "I'm not going to destroy it all again." But I think that this is good that it speaks to the worldwide flood. And we said before, because there's a lot of people that deny that there was a worldwide flood. They just say it was a local flood, but all it's doing is showing that our God still is tougher than their God, and and that it was regional. But if he's talking about all the flesh, because if I can go to Smith's or Safeway 2 hills over, I can go get the food that got destroyed in my local flood, here. I mean, it'd be like if Havasu flooded, okay, well, I guess I can go to Parker and get food. Even though the God of Havasu is saying, I've destroyed all flesh, he meant the Havasu flesh. He didn't mean the whole world's flesh. Yeah. So I don't know, and I don't know why people, and I've heard all the arguments. I don't know why people object so much to a worldwide flood, but they do. It's got to be a thing that they just don't believe that there's a God. And so there was a local flood that the people attributed to an act of God. So I don't
I have a question for you.
yeah.
Okay. In one of the commentaries that I read, the word bow.
The word what?
The word bow.
Bow?
Yeah, like bow and arrow.
Uh-huh.
That's what the sign was supposed to be that God set up in the heavens, so that every time that we look up there and we see the rain and an ark appears or a bow appears, but it has been changed to rainbow. Now, they use the word rainbow instead of the word bow.
Yeah, what do we see after the rain?
Well, we call it rainbow, but
well, I don't see a bow and arrow up there.
well, it's minus the arrow.
Well, no, but I'm saying I don't
the
see.
The bow is pointing towards heaven. It's not this way; it's this way.
It could be, but we don't know because it doesn't. And I'd have to look at what. I'd have to go back and look and see what the wording is.
But in this one, in NIV and all others say rainbow.
Well, I've put my bow. Well, okay, but I don't know. Oh, well, I don't know of any bow that's used for battle that looks like like what we have as a rainbow. That's what I don't,
It's just the arc. Another word for bow would be arc. Bow.
yeah,
And
then,
then you got arc pretty soon. Arc. You know,
Yeah.
so
yeah.
call it what you want.
Yeah.
It's the same
No,
thing.
no. But well, wait, before I get to Lowell, did the guy have an upshot to that?
No, it was just he was saying that the bow and the bow pointed towards heaven, but it was minus the arrow, and therefore it's like an instrument of war. But
So that was his upshot, is that somehow that what God's going to do is put an instrument of war in the sky. And well, I don't think I've ever heard anybody interpret it that way. I can understand him using a similar word
yeah.
for something that is bowed, but that's why I said, what's his upshot? What's his final point? And if it's that he's going to call it an instrument of war, then I think he's got an agenda that he's trying to.
It was said in the Hebrew Bible that the word "bikrat" means bow, and because they didn't have a word for that, they changed it to rainbow. But in essence, it doesn't really make a difference whether you use bow or rainbow.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, like I say, I can say that he's making something that we can relate to a bow, like a bow and arrow, and that this is what it's going to look like, but I can't see any significance of it.
Well, he was also tying it to the fact that now political groups are using the rainbow, like the Rainbow Coalition or the Gay Pride thing. It's all the rainbow now, multicolored. So they're detracting from its original meaning.
Yeah, but what is his alternative, that we go back to thinking more that it's an instrument of war and not a colorful bow?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, so that's what, see, that's the thing that always I shouldn't say always happens, but it always happens when people come up with their own, own thing. If I can open up 20 commentaries and nobody says what he said, and then he says what he says, I can't say that he's wrong, but it's like, how these other 20 people miss it? That's what I don't. Do you have it still online?
Oh, yeah.
Send it to me. Send it to me so I can look and see what he says. What we're going to say, well,
Well,
can you remember that long?
we're led to believe that if everybody was a vegetarian prior to Noah and the ark landing, right? So why would they need a bow and arrow to kill animals or kill anything? Yeah.
I
We don't know.
yeah.
We don't know, Gene, if they use swords to fight.
What? We only know what it says. That's all that we know is
Heard of it, bow and arrow.
Yeah, Lutherans have always been is that we can profess or confess anything that's written in Scripture. But if it's not talked about in Scripture, we have to kind of sit quiet and just not. But there's other groups who want to give an answer, and I've talked about this before, and you go a step too far, you go a paragraph too far in explaining what you're trying to explain, and you've probably moved into heresy somehow. Because now what you've done is you've made up what you think it says and not what it says. Were you going to say something, Pastor?
Yeah, I was just on a quick look up too. I hadn't really considered that, but it was saying that, God hung up his instrument of judgment. He's not going to judge the people
Yeah.
with the bow. That's a symbol that I'm not going to destroy you again. And maybe it's a double meaning
Yeah.
thing, but again, it's not clear, like you said.
Yeah. I'll look into it. I'll look into it. Like I say, I can't say that the guy's wrong. I'm just saying, if you read 20 commentaries and nobody said that, it's like, well, why would they want to miss such an opportunity to be innovative?
It's like I said, it doesn't matter, but it's in essence, they're saying we changed the word because we don't have a word for that word.
Yeah.
So we changed bow to rainbow, and this we did it because we didn't have a word for that interpretation or an equal meaning to it. This is the closest thing we can come to.
Well, I mean, it does come after rain. I don't know. Now we haven't been outside for what, 3 hours or so? I don't know that we're gonna walk out and see a rainbow out there. You know? See, I would think that God's sun and heat is his battle weapon of judgment. Okay, well, let's move on. Yeah, do you got your microphone so Howard can hear? Oh, I don't even see it there. Where is it? It should be on. Okay. The what? Right. No, it was God's covenant, and it was God's covenant of peace for the people. When Ray was talking about the rainbow, the gay pride stuff and all that, in the rainbow, I'm guessing there's 7 colors. In the gay pride rainbow, there's 6 colors. They can't even get that right. Yeah. Maybe they did that purposely. Maybe they just didn't want to tread too far into God's territory. I can't remember.
Orange, yellow, indigo, and violet. Now, which is 5, not 7.
No. I saw a picture. I saw a picture of a rainbow, and I counted the colors. Okay, let's move on. Then God spoke to Noah and his son, saying, As for me, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and every living creature that is with you, birds, cattle, all this stuff. Thus I establish my covenant. Never again will I destroy it. And God said in verse 12, let me check something here. And God said in verse 12, where'd I go here? And God said, This is the sign of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you. For perpetual generations, I set my rainbow in the cloud. Now, who says bow? Which
I'm
verse?
looking it up right now. Is there any Bible that uses bow instead of rainbow to see King James or one of the other ones?
Well, mine's New King James that I'm doing out of, and it said rainbow. What version do you have?
ESV.
ESV?
I set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign. That's verse
Okay.
13.
Yeah, 13, and so it's all in there.
Yeah.
But what's the difference?
But it doesn't necessarily mean bow and arrow bow. Right. Yeah, no.
It says there will be 7 colors.
Pardon?
It says there will be 7 colors.
That's what I said.
There it is.
What? There are 7 colors, huh? Well, I knew that. And the gay one has 6. The gay one has 6.
So
And have you ever looked at a color and said, "Oh, indigo"?
There you go.
What color is indigo?
This is no.
so King James says, I will set my bow,
Yeah, and I know.
and it doesn't say rainbow like New King James. But also something else I was looking at said the primary meaning of the Hebrew word is for the weapon, the bow, but a secondary meaning is also used for rainbow for the same word.
I wonder though if well, again, because Genesis. Here's the hard part about Genesis. So when God says this, Is he saying it back in Genesis time? And he's telling Moses when he's writing it down, I said it in Genesis time. This is what I said 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago? Or is he telling, is he making this up during Moses' time? Because so far as what we know, we don't even know if they had bows. Oh, no. Moses' time is all the other books of the Torah, Exodus, and the other four. Yeah, Moses is writing Genesis, but he's writing it before his time. You know, like he's writing, so God's talking to him, and if God, this is getting way off. So it'd be like me coming, say I'm a time traveler, and I've come from 2,000 years ago, and I say to you, I said, talking about back then, you know, when I was leaving home in my time machine, I said, well, it's something I said 2,000 years ago. So my references are 2,000 years ago, even though I'm telling you to write it down, you know, write it. I'll look for it. I'll look for it. I mean, but again, because when it says this is what the word means, yeah, but is that what it meant in the Hebrew in Moses's time? And did it mean that in their time? So here's what you have to watch for. And we'll finish up here. Here's what you have to watch for. We're doing words. In fact, this was something I was going to bring up next Friday at the Masters Men thing. We're talking about Mormonism. But when you're talking to people and they're trying to disprove your point, and nobody here's trying to disprove a point. But see, God says in Isaiah, this relates to Mormons and whether there's one God or there's many gods like they believe. Is in Isaiah 43:10, it says, you know, that I am God, the first and the last. There's no gods before me, no gods after me. That means there's one God. I am that God, right? But then the Mormon comes along and says, no, one does not always just mean the numeral one. Okay? And then they take you, this is what they do. I've watched them do it. They'll take you to John 17, when Jesus is praying in the garden. And he's saying that, you know, I know, God, that you want them to be one as you and I are one. So when they're going through, it says that like 3 times in there. But when they go through that, that's a one in unity. Like, I want this class to be one. But there's more individuals in that one. So they use that against what it says in Isaiah, where he's talking about a singular one. But see, what we do is you go 700 years in distance to a different writer in a different context and try to compare what the word means here and what the word means, you know, what the word means there. And we're probably kind of stuck that way in, you know, in here when we're trying to figure out who used what for, you know, what for words. Because remember, I guess I'd have to look in my Strongs, you know, in a linear and see what the word is that was used in 9:3, or what was that, 9, whatever it was, in chapter 9, and then go find a battle scene in Numbers or something, and see when it says, you know, when Jonathan shot his arrow, you know, to warn David, you know, that King Saul was after him. You know, if he says he grabbed his bow and shot, I have to say, is it the same word there? Or did they apply that word? I don't know. It's,
Well,
what's that?
He called it art. The art is like a bow. What he's been talking about a bow, because it's going to serve his purpose.
well, there's ARC and there's
Well, no,
ARK.
yeah, no, when Hudson talked about that, he talked about an arch. He talked, yeah.
Okay. This is what I have in, you know, looking up. It says, difficult text. I have set my bow in the clouds, Genesis 9:13. Suddenly, God covenant in Genesis 9 was with Noah and with every living creature. In both passages, the covenant will have implications of the whole earth. In Hosea, the sign of the covenant was the breaking of the bow, while in Genesis, the sign is the setting of the bow in
Yeah,
the
but
sky.
again, that's doing the same thing. That's going 1,500 years in the future to Hosea and saying that he broke his bow. Hey, that's the same thing, or that's the opposite of what happened there. I don't know that you can, I don't know that
I
you
think
can
it's a
do.
non-issue.
Wow.
Really.
Yeah. Well, it probably is, but I guess got to look into why it's called a rainbow.
Because of the remnant.
I don't know, but it may be so that it wasn't confused with a battle weapon. I don't know. I don't know.
But every time they saw a thundercloud, they must have been scared of hell.
Thought what?
Every time they saw a thundercloud, they must have been scared of the hell. But they saw the rainbow and said, okay, no problem, it's not a flood.
I think that if it stopped raining and you saw
So
a
what's the
rainbow-
Hebrew translation?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'll look it all up. I'll have a full report. It may be exactly what Ray says, and it may be exactly what that writer, says like that. But because it's the same word, doesn't mean that it has the same context. Like that. We do that in English. That we say, well, even the example I did about the one God. And I want this class to be one. Well, this class is what is it, 15, 18 of us here right now? Well, does one mean 15 people or does one mean one people? Depends on the context. Even though it can be the exact same word. You can say, okay.
I'm still studying.
No, I know. No, that's why I let the conversation go, because I hadn't heard that before. I didn't run across it in any of the stuff that I did for, preparation. That doesn't mean it wasn't in there. And I skipped right over it because, it didn't make sense.
One, WON.
That's you. That's right. That's his, your moniker, your email thing.
My wife remember Australia, we won a trip to Las Vegas and back to Australia.
So he
You
changed.
guys, a good name would be Mike One.
So he changed his name. Okay, anybody have anything else? We'll pick up where we left out. Any of you feel free to look into this thing with the bow and report back next week, because this is the way, but this is the way that you learn to kind of, properly divide the word by what it means. Huh? It says the Hebrew word for rainbow is keshet. It's Keshet. The word also means war bow. It is no wonder that ancient Hebrews referred to this phenomenon as a bow. As a matter of fact, the Hebrew word for rainbow is the same as the word for bow used by the Hebrew warriors. Despite these similarities, this term for rainbow still sounds a little foreign to us today. Well, it goes on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
But the story is, again, is because it's the same word, doesn't mean that that's what God's intention is. Yeah, so, yeah. And he may have declared the rainbow before bow and arrows were introduced. We don't know, but we don't know. What's that?
I vote for rainbow.
Yeah, well, no. Now, what do we do if we figure out that it really is supposed to be bow? Do we stop saying rainbow?
You can.
What? Can't call it. I don't know. Okay. Howard, did we run you all around?
It's raining out.
It's raining out, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna hang on. Let me turn off the